The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
I think that's the biggest reason why a lot of us are going towards the right, is because we're seeing things actually happen instead of just hearing about it.
Later on The Agenda.
Maybe the technology we have right now just isn't good enough. Maybe, some days AI might be fantastic, but this year's AI really might be running into a wall.
The Conservative Party of Canada's support among young people appears to be on the rise, echoing a trend in democracies around the world where right-wing parties are garnering a larger share of the youth vote. What's drawing young people to the right? Have tough economic times and social media brought a whole new generation of voters to the Conservative fold? Let's ask, in the nation's capital via Skype, Josie Sabatino, Senior Consultant at Summa Strategies and former Director of Communications for Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole. And with us here in studio, Tina Park, Lecturer in Canadian Nationalism and CEO of the Park Group, a consulting firm focused on global governance. David Coletto, Professor of Political Management and CEO of the polling firm Abacus Data. Sam Routley, PhD candidate in Political Science at Western University in London. And Jade Kassam, Junior Consultant at Wellington Advocacy and a Conservative Party supporter. And it's great to have all of you folks here in our studio. And Josie, thanks for being there in the nation's capital for us as well. David, I want to go to you first because you've got some numbers out that are truly intriguing here. Young Canadians supported Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party 4 years ago to the tune of 34%. Yeah. And that number today is not 34%, it's 25%. And that's a pretty big drop. I gather you think this is one of the biggest stories in Canadian politics today, and I wonder if you could tell us why.
Well, I think it is, Stephen. I think it's because if you had come to me or if I'd come to you a year ago and said, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party is more popular among Canadians over the age of 60 than they are among Canadians under 30, you would have said to me, David, go do another poll.
Go back in the field.
Go back in the field.
Yes.
That data is no good. Yeah. And what we're seeing consistently is the opposite of that, right? And I think that, to me, is the biggest story, because for so long, and I had to go back, I was looking even in data back into the early 2000s, like the last time a Conservative Party around an election was able to poll close to 40% among younger voters, couldn't find it, right? You have to almost probably go back to Mulrooney in '84 when anything like that happened. And so something's happening that is attracting young people to the Conservatives, but I also think largely repelling them away from the Liberals. And that, to me, is the biggest story, because Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government won their majority in 2015 because we saw this youth quake of millennials coming out and voting Liberal. And I think they saved them in the last two federal elections when the rest of the country was ready to throw Mr. Trudeau out.
Well, this program's all about theories as to why this is happening. So, Josie, why don't you come on in here and let's not have everybody do 4 or 5 reasons. Let's have everybody do one reason why you think this, you want to call it a youth quake? Maybe we're there yet, maybe not, I don't know. Let's see. Why this movement of youth, anyway, to supporting Conservatives is happening. What do you think?
Well, it's hard to narrow it down to just one condition. I think when you look at the series of factors that have impacted the lives of youth, and really when you're looking at that kind of 20 to 35 demographic, this is where their biggest changes are happening in terms of career and where they're going to work. And when you factor in the COVID-19 pandemic and how much disruption that caused, I think it's the perfect storm for some of these economic conditions we're seeing. And the youth need to have hope. They need to know that, they're going to have a stable job opportunity and they're going to be able to buy a house one day. And that's just not what's happening. And I think that really, really creates some of these economic anxieties that we're seeing today.
Tina, what are you seeing?
Well, I think I agree with that. There's a great deal of anger and anxiety among the young people today. They can't afford to rent. They can't afford to buy a house. They're having a very hard time with their grocery bills because things cost more. And, there's a big mismatch of supply and demand in our economy. Coupled with that, they're also finding that there's no clear vision that they once hoped for with Mr. Trudeau. And when you listen to Mr. Poilievre and what he's saying on social media, he comes across as somebody who is very direct, very clear, and a guy with a lot of common sense. And because they're so angry and just looking for some signs of change, they're really finding him attractive and listening to all these YouTube clips and what he's saying on social media.
We'll pick up on social media again later. People your age, what's their take on what's happening out there in terms of the economy?
Well, obviously, you know, we're in an economic challenge right now. Everything is too expensive. Life is too, like, no one my age can afford anything. And so I think the biggest challenge right now for us is that we're all new grads. We're all trying to move out of home, get our own place to live, and we feel like we're back at square one. We're back at living at home, having no money to pay for groceries, and I think the biggest reason why youth are going towards conservatives are because the conservatives are giving them real-life examples. They're giving them real-life things to work on. Poilievre is doing Axe Attacks rallies, or he's bringing out so many youth and engaging them, and so they want to see that real-life example of change is going to happen. And so I think that's the biggest reason why a lot of us are going towards the right, is because we're seeing things actually happen instead of just hearing about it.
Sam, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, what matters here, I think, is we need to determine what belongs in sort of a short-term category versus a long-term category, because I think it's not unusual historically for conservatives to win these large majorities, right? As in 84, 62 or so. Where there's a sort of growing anti-liberal sentiment, a malaise in the country, a desire for change. And to that extent, I think we can understand a lot of the youth support for the Conservatives as this anti-liberal sentiment, in the sense that alongside the rest of Canadians, they're sort of desiring a change in Ottawa. And whether or not that is supportive enough of the Conservatives in and of itself to stay there, you know, in the next kind of coming electoral cycles is unclear. Because we also have to think about the long-term changes here, which is to say that while I think young people are kind of feeling the crunch of these immediate economic stresses, you know, like inflation or housing, this is also very long-term, something that will be felt for that has already been felt for a decade and will be felt for decades to come, this lack of economic security.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned social media a second ago, and I want to follow up with Josie on that right now, because Mr. Poilievre certainly is getting kudos for the way he uses social media to get his views out there. How has the whole rise of social media changed the way politicians interact with the public in between campaigns?
Well, I think what's really important for an opposition leader like Pierre Poilievre is that he has a lot of freedom to test messages. And I think we're seeing this kind of roll out. You know, he's using long form videos to tell a story to Canadians that really resonates. And he's using visual descriptors to really back up the emotional sentiment that I think a lot of, you know, Canadians are feeling. A perfect example is when he was talking about encampments in Vancouver and really trying to speak to the emotions and the really strong feelings that some British Columbians have about the situation that is facing them. So I think opposition is a good time to really test these message. And I think as we get closer to a campaign, we'll see a bit more message discipline and really focusing on some of the high-level messages like the economy that he is really going to be focused on framing the ballot box question around come the next election.
Jay, does this stuff on social media really resonate for the long term? I get it that it gives you a definite jolt in the moment, but does it have legs, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so Gen Z are the generations who grew up in technology, and now we're using that platform to help advocate and engage others for topics that we care about a lot. So I think this technology and this social media platform that the Conservatives are using is a really good long-term effect, because we like to watch short and concise videos that get to the point and say everything we want. Instead of having to sit there and watch long, boring, dry videos, we want everything we want to know in 20 seconds.
Although he's done that too. Like he did 20 minutes on the dead.
But we still want to enjoy it because the way he talks, he's witty and he engages you. And so it's not dry or boring. It's I wouldn't mind sitting there for 20 minutes watching it because he's funny and he knows how to hook you. Like in the beginning of his videos, the first 5 seconds is always a hook. So it keeps you want to watch the whole thing. And so I do agree, it is a long-term effect.
David.
I mean, the other thing that we're seeing, and I hear it anecdotally too from parents who have teenage, like or 20-something kids is that they're seeing Pierre Poilievre's ads on YouTube. And so one of the other parts of this story that I don't think we talk enough about is the Conservatives have a massive fundraising advantage over the other parties. And so, yes, social media is really important. And we just did some research after the last federal budget, a budget that, by the way, was meant to, reduce generational inequities. That was the theme that the Prime Minister and the government wanted to get across. A third of Canadians under the age of 30 didn't even know there was a budget, right? And so I think Ottawa, where I live, official Ottawa, still operates in an analog kind of world where increasingly everyone, but especially, as Jade said, Gen Z, is in a digital world. And the Conservatives, because they have this spending advantage, are speaking directly to young people. And Justin Trudeau and the Liberals and even the New Democrats are just hoping they hear it in earned media, like on this show.
Okay, that's fascinating. And Tina, maybe you could pick up on this, because when Justin Trudeau won his first majority in 2015, he was the youngest of the party leaders and seemed to be the choice of the next generation. And now here we are, whatever it is, 8.5 years later, and he's now the oldest of the major party leaders, and doesn't, at least the Liberals don't seem to get what David just said, namely, you got to be where the young kids are, and they don't seem to have a presence on YouTube. How are they miscalculating like this?
Well, I think they're certainly trying, but it's not working. So if you look at the YouTube channels of Mr. Poilievre or others, you see a very consistent and very aggressive messaging coming out that regular, average voters could relate to. And your average Canadian, especially the younger people, may not be reading the Globe and Mail every day and watching CBC religiously, as some of us may have been for the past few decades. They are on YouTube. They're on, X or Instagram, looking and scrolling for the latest news. And because he is so effective in delivering messages, Josie mentioned short clips. Yeah, some of his most popular clips on Mr. Poilievre's channels are 30 seconds, right? And in 30 seconds, you are hearing a very strong message about a housing crisis or, something that affects your grocery bills. And he even presents a solution in that short span of time.
So, I don't know about that.
He articulates a vision. I may not agree with it. You may not agree with this, Steve. But in a very short span of time, he is delivering a very clear alternative and targeting these angry voters who are resentful about the fact that they're living in their basement of their parents' homes, or unable to buy a new home, or having to cut down on things because grocery bills are so high. So there is a problem that he's addressing.
I'm going to challenge that a bit, because Mr. Poilievre is an expert at axe the tax, fix the budget, build the homes, stop the crime. I mean, I didn't even look down at my notes. And
I just wrote that.
You wrote that?
Literally
Okay.
just wrote those
It's
4
stuck in
lines.
my head because he just says it so often. And I am, I guess, a typical idiot example of somebody who, when you hear something long enough, it sticks in your head. But that's not that's not really a solution. That's a bumper sticker. So, Sam, I wonder, he's got the social media thing all figured out. He is attracting a younger audience. Are you seeing solutions out there, like real solutions?
I mean, I think if we're looking at the, the comprehensive sort of policy solutions that will actually address some of the core problems, I think that's minimal.
You think it's what?
Minimal.
Minimal. Okay.
Mostly because, at this stage, if you're in Poilievre's position and running a front-runner campaign where you're pretty well expected to succeed, you really don't want to rock the boat too much. But with that being said, too, I think being able to recognize the problem and voice the discontent itself gets you far enough, at least when it comes to attaining office. And I think Poilievre's communications, right, have been really successful in the sense that, speaking as someone who belongs to this age bracket, right, it's very cathartic, right? It feels very, you feel very much heard.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, we love catharsis here. But Josie, come on in on this. And that is, axe the tax, is not a particularly profound policy prescription. Fix the budget is not a particularly profound policy prescription. Stop the crime. I could go on here, right? At what point do you think he's got to put some flesh on that bone?
Well, I think I would challenge this as well. I think that there are tangible solutions that he has put on the table. I mean, he tabled an entire private members bill about housing and, really speeding up building permits to start these construction projects. The carbon tax, we know Canadians don't like. This is something that's come across in public polling that I'm sure David can speak to. And this is a step in the right direction of starting to make life more affordable for Canadians. And it sounds like a talking point, but this is the kind of stuff that will be rolled out likely in the first year and will be a tangible, credible point for Poilievre to point to about making life more affordable for Canadians. So I think we're seeing these policies roll out. Sometimes you miss them just through the course of how much is being put out there. But there is starting to be these building blocks that will ultimately lead to the policy platform, which will be released during the actual federal election campaign.
Let me test that out with David. David, if you were in the field with young people 10 years ago, you would find issue 1, 2, and 3, which were at the top of their list of concerns. Okay, we're 10 years later now. Are those issues different?
They are, in the sense that I think we've seen an emerging scarcity mindset across all Canadians. I mean, one of the unique things is that those issue sets aren't that different. Whether you are 60 plus or under 30, the only real difference is healthcare. Older Canadians much more likely to put healthcare up, given that they're going to need the system,
yes,
right, to be there for them specifically in a shorter period of time. But what we've noticed over the last year is that issues like climate change, social justice, have fallen on the list of what younger Canadians are saying are important to them when we give them a long list and say pick 3. And what's really emerged are the 3 things we've been talking about: cost of living, housing affordability, and economic security, right? Healthcare is there for young people too, but it's much more about this sense of, I'm not sure the world is gonna be a place that I can get a good, stable job anymore, given how fast things are moving. So I think that scarcity mindset has pushed a lot of these other issues down the chain. And so someone's basically saying, look, if I'm going to get evicted and then I have to pay $1,000 more a month for rent, I can't really worry about climate change right now, right? And so a politician like Pierre Poilievre, who is feeling that and articulating it, at least right now, is connecting.
Jade, let me test that with you. Do you care less about climate change and social justice now and more about affordability and paying the rent and all that?
Well, I wouldn't say I care less about it. I would say without being able to live or afford anything, what's climate change going to do for me? Like, talking to my peers and to my friends, we do support climate change, but how important is climate change to us when we can't put food on our table, we can't heat our homes, we can't, fill up our tanks? And so it really comes down to weighing out how important something is and versus like our environment. And for us to live is the most important, in our opinion.
I guess the next thing we've got to sort of explore here is whether or not what we're seeing at the moment is a fundamental shift and change in the nature of Canadian politics, or is this one of these sort of typical, the Liberals are down right now, so of course the Conservatives are up, but it's nothing more permanent. Tina, you want to start off on that? We're seeing it here, we're seeing it around the world. Flirtation with more conservative parties right now.
That's certainly a trend. And, in Canadian history, we've certainly seen this, wave of Liberals in power and then Conservatives in power, especially at the federal level. That is entirely normal in our history. What is new, I think, with the current state of things with Mr. Poilievre is that he is very different than the conservative leaders we've seen in the past, right?
How so?
I mean, you look at the red Tory tradition of, people like Hugh Segal or, even what John Charest promoted. It was a different set of, approaches and policy issues that they put forward. But ultimately, the members of the Conservative Party preferred what Mr. Poilievre was putting forward. And, one of his most popular videos on housing health, for instance, blames the government for the current housing crisis we have. And it also points to gatekeepers, right? So when we talk of the central message that he's putting forward, it's that, everything is going wrong and going down south and the government is to blame for it and I can fix it. That's sort of the basic message that he's putting forward. And the gatekeepers gatekeepers or, the elites or the bureaucrats and the government that's been enlarging over the last 9 years under Mr. Trudeau's leadership. When you look at the facts of what has happened, right, it is true that the Canadian public service has enlarged by 36% over the last decade, right? That is not insignificant considering the economic pressures of COVID-19, considering inflation pressures, as well as general, state of economy that we're seeing in Canada where productivity is lacking. So what we're seeing is that those who can afford to do so are leaving Canada because taxes are so punitive if you are very successful. And then there are others who are struggling to make ends meet, right? So there's a very significant population in Canada that is unhappy about the state of things in the Canadian economy and Canadian politics.
Sam, I want to ask you this question. You're a PhD student in political science. I mean, it doesn't get much more elite gatekeeping than that. Do you feel like Poilievre's coming after you?
I mean, to some extent, in the broader sense that there is this sort of anti-establishmentarian discourse, this anti-elitist discourse. But I mean, looking at this within broader trends, I think the key to understanding Poilievre and where the Conservatives are going is this sort of use of populist language, is sort of being directed to a very sort of conventional or traditional conservative policy approach, very much in line with Harper.
And young people like that?
I mean, using it to justify, a very sort of individualistic approach, small government, free markets, so forth. Whereas in other countries, in Europe and the United States, you're seeing precisely that same rhetoric used towards a very kind of contrasting set of policies. Something much more communitarian, much more exclusionary, including much more of an expanding state, I should say. And I mean, I think it seems to me that this is more of a short-term trend. I'm skeptical of the fact that we're going to see young people as a whole shift, simply because much of this is anti-liberal sentiment. But I mean, there are some divisions emerging amongst the Canadian population between different cultural and economic groups that I think you could see young people as they age get sorted into.
David, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, hard times increase voters' willingness to experiment, right? And I think that's what we're seeing right now. I don't think we can say with any certainty that this is a long-term trend in which young Canadians are going to embrace the Conservatives and it's going to be part of their, life behavioral when they vote. And the other thing that's interesting about younger Canadians is that they don't fit neatly into any ideological box, right? So in the polling that I do, when I ask them, and I compare them, let's say 18 to 35-year-olds, to everyone older than them, they are more likely to want to see a balanced budget, but they are far more likely to say, I want to see social justice, inclusion, diversity as part of my government's agenda. They are much more willing and want their government to move the economy to a clean energy future, but they're the most likely to say, I'm okay if you experiment with private healthcare delivery. So there's these contradictions in the normal sense that we think about politics in Canada. That means when any one of these issues becomes more salient at any given time, they might react positively or negatively to the political option. So what I think is happening here is, first and foremost, this is very much a rejection of the Liberals and disappointment in the state of their life. And Pierre Poilievre is speaking almost entirely about those scarcity issues, which is why, like all Canadians, they're embracing him and the Conservative Party.
Josie, I want to ask you about fairness. And we know that there is no place for fairness in politics. It's just unfair, like life. But I think it's fair to say that all of the problems that ail this country right now are not all Justin Trudeau's fault. If it rains, it's not his fault, but he'll get blamed for it anyway. So having said that, do you think it's fair, maybe a silly question to ask, but do you think it's fair at the moment for young people to say, you know what, homes are too expensive, inflation's too high, I'm not getting the job I want, opportunity isn't there, and it's all your fault, Prime Minister Trudeau? Is that fair?
Well, governing is hard, and that's why, Justin Trudeau has been in the hot seat for so many years. But I just want to pick up on a point that David was talking about. And I want to state the Conservatives have been running on the economy for the last decade, since the former Harper government years. This is a message that they have tried to communicate to voters. The time and place wasn't right, and Jade's pointed out, other issues were fundamental to kind of what they were voting on, and I'm thinking of the environment as an example. And now the time has come when the voter mindset has shifted, and they are looking for a credible alternative that can correctly diagnose how they're feeling about the issues of the day, and that firmly rests with cost of living, that rests with housing, and fundamentally they want to see somebody shift the focus to the economy. And Justin Trudeau, as much as he is trying to talk about this and spend the money to try and fix the problem, it is just not working. And that is why I think we are seeing this fundamental shift of young voters switching over to Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives.
All right, Jade, I want to go at that again, though. Do young people understand that not every bad thing that happens in Canada 24/7 is Justin Trudeau's fault?
Well, I would say it's hard because not all young people are in politics. So I think those that are in politics understand it firsthand because they're in it. They see what's happening. But from the outside, it's hard for them to really understand that it's not all just Justin Trudeau. There's other factors on the outside that are the reasons why we're in this economy.
But they seem to be taking it out on him more than anybody else.
Because they don't really understand what the other factors are. I just don't think they're well equipped or educated within politics to understand that he is the bad guy, but he's not the only bad guy.
Does your polling pick any of that up?
Well, first, I think you said, do young Canadians think? I think you should expand that to all Canadians, because I think most Canadians do blame policy choices that all governments, but the federal government's the highest profile, so it gets more of the blame for this. But I think what I think is happening is that the Conservatives right now are doing what Justin Trudeau did in 2015, which a little bit more negative and a little bit more diagnostic of a more challenging time. I think in 2015, voters were looking for optimism, and Justin Trudeau was the perfect person to tap into that. But they're also setting up another cycle that we've just experienced, where if you are promising the world, basically, you're promising that every community is going to have all the houses we need, and that cost of living is instantly just going to become affordable, I think there's going to be a lot of disappointment on the other end of the next federal election if the Conservatives win, because the things that we are talking about are hard to fix, right? You had a federal budget that invested more money in housing than we've ever seen, and we can debate about whether it was the right policy choices or not. But the young Canadians who are hoping to be able to afford their rent are not really going to see the effects of that budget for 5 to 6 years. And by then, they're at a different stage in their life. And so that's the tough part with connecting politics with public policy. And all of the issues we're grappling with today, governments have almost no levers in which they can solve them. And that is the fundamental problem.
Well, let me pick up on that with you, Tina, because you do a lot of international travel. So you surely know that young people everywhere in the world right now are dealing with a lot of the after effects of the issues we've been talking about. High deficits for a long time, difficulty funding social programs, inflation running too high, labor shortages, which cause the price of things. I mean, all of this is happening everywhere. And yet they still blame Trudeau for everything? Is that reasonable?
Well, I don't think it's fair to blame, Prime Minister Trudeau for all the problems that we're having. And I don't think all young people in Canada think that way either. I do see a lot of informed and engaged young people in my classroom every year, and they are still very passionate about, the future of Canada and where we're going, and they are willing to work hard. Now, the problem, I think, Steve, is that it is very difficult for them to be successful under the current set of circumstances. And surely we have seen, disgruntled youth before and, protests and what have you, but this is different. I do think that it is a uniquely Canadian situation that we're seeing right now, where we have, the biggest housing bubble in Toronto in the world, right? Where it's almost difficult, if not impossible, for young people in their 20s after undergrad to buy a new home or to even rent something decent, right? This is a very Torontonian problem that my students are facing, and they really honestly don't have a solution for it. And I think...
Well, can I suggest one solution? Now, they may not like this solution, but it is a solution. there's no section of the Constitution that guarantees you the right to an affordable home in the city of Toronto. Is it possible they may have to go somewhere else?
They are going elsewhere, but that also means they can't work in the city center, or it's very difficult for them to do so. And, I think how we capture the hearts and minds of the young people who are willing to work hard and not only make ends meet, but be successful in our society is really the challenge here, because, I may not personally agree with the messages of Mr. Polyev on his YouTube channels, but if you're a young person just very angry about the state of life in Canada, it is very attractive because he offers an alternative vision to what you're dealing with.
Okay, we've got a few minutes. Oh, sure.
Can I just
David,
make
go ahead. Sure.
one comparison? And this whole blame Trudeau, I think he deserves some of the fault, not in the choices he's made, but the way he's addressed it. He did a podcast last summer, the CBC podcast, and it was about housing. And he used the term when the host asked, "What do you say to young Canadians who can't afford a home?" And he says, "My heart breaks for them." And I thought, like, that's not the kind of language you want to do to demonstrate empathy. And when we compare Mr.
Wait a minute, why? That sounds very empathetic.
Well, it's what I feel like a prince says in his castle about his subjects, not like I'm rolling my sleeves up every day to do everything I can to do it. And where I think if you compare Mr. Trudeau with Premier Ford, for example, here in Ontario, Mr. Ford's willing to admit when he has made mistakes almost every day, it seems. Justin Trudeau hasn't really said to people, I not just I understand what you're going through, but maybe everything we've done hasn't made things better. And I think that is the biggest barrier to him rebuilding a relationship with young Canadians, because he simply is refusing to admit that anything he's done has helped contribute to the problem.
Okay, with a few minutes to go here, let's find where the rubber hits the road here. And I'm going to put this on the record. Young people for years and years and years have complained about the state of things in Canada that don't focus on them enough, and yet when election day comes, they don't show up to vote. They've broken the hearts of every campaign manager in this country. So, Josie, to you first. Young people, I get it, they're very unhappy right now. They think Pierre Poilievre might be their champion. Are they actually going to show up on voting day, whenever that is, and put an X on a ballot?
Well, having been, part of those war room campaigns, my heart has been broken time and time again for this exact reason. But I think when the rubber hits the road and things matter, young people will come out to vote. We saw this in 2015, and that was the decider for Justin Trudeau getting.
That's because he legalized marijuana. They can't do that one again.
Well, now they want a house. So I think that they're going to have to cast that ballot and really come together and make change if that's what they want to see in their government and their representatives.
Jade, what do you say? Are young people finally going to get off their couches and vote?
Yeah, well, you've seen it firsthand at by-elections in Ontario. You've seen it at the...
What do you mean I've seen it firsthand with by-elections in Ontario?
We've seen it firsthand.
Turnout was terrible.
But we have, maybe they won't come out to vote, but they have supporters. All the young people come out and work on these campaigns. They come out and they help canvass for Poilievre's Common Sense Canvas Day. And so I do think they're getting more engaged now, and I do think that if they want to change, they will come out, and they will come out and vote for our new Prime Minister.
You think so?
I hope so. But, we could also consider what Australia is doing, which is you are fined if you don't show up on the voting day. And there's a clear financial incentive for people to show up.
And turnout's 99% as a result.
Right.
Yeah. Sam, what do you think?
I mean, it's hard to say. But with that being said, the Conservatives, given the amount of support they have amongst younger people and Canadians in general, really don't need too many of them to show up to benefit from it. And also, too, what really matters, I think, is not so much the turnout they're going to get now, but it's the turnout they're going to get in 4 years, which will be the real test of the extent and the depth of that support.
Let me get David finally on this. Do you think they're going to show up?
I'm skeptical. I mean, I've studied voting behavior. I think 2015 was an anomaly. I mean, we've seen sustained higher turnout among younger people over the course of the next two elections. But I think since the pandemic, we've seen across the board, Canadians generally, but particularly young people, I think just being less engaged in their community. And I worry that despite how much they want a change, that the way our politics is working is going to turn a lot of people off by the time we get to that vote.
As I often say at the end of this program, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, We shall see. Mr. Director, can I have a shot of all of our guests, please, as I thank Tina Park, David Coletto, Josie Sabatino, Sam Routley, and Jade Kassem for coming onto our program tonight. It's been great having you all here. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
When ChatGPT launched in late 2022, the possibilities seemed endless for this technology. And it was only getting better and more sophisticated. So much so that folks such as the godfather of AI, the U of T's Geoffrey Hinton, warned of its potential danger. But has AI hit a wall? Are those big exponential gains that were promised beginning to plateau? Are we now in a world of diminishing returns for AI? Let's find out. In Vancouver, British Columbia, here's Gary Marcus. He's Emeritus Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at New York University and the author of the forthcoming book, Taming Silicon Valley. And he joins us now to discuss that. Professor Marcus, great to have you back on TVO. How are you?
It's great to be back.
Excellent. Let's go back a year and a half. ChatGPT becomes a new thing in our lives, or at least for many of us anyway. To what extent do you think that a lot of the excitement and fear around AI since then has been based on the idea that this was only the beginning and that AIs were only going to get exponentially more powerful going forward?
Well, I think everybody is imagining that they'll go exponentially better. There was a earlier system called GPT-2, and then it wasn't that great. GPT-3 was worth looking at, but still not that great. And then GPT-4 was actually genuinely useful for a bunch of people, and it was certainly fun to play with. And I think people were expecting, okay, now we're going to have GPT-5 and GPT-6 and GPT-7, and they're all just going to be so much better. I read somebody saying that every 5 to 14 months, these things double, but they actually misread the study. And the reality is things actually probably have slowed down a little bit. So there was a big leap forward, but we have some problems now. For example, these systems are very greedy in terms of how much data they use. And now they're basically using the whole internet, and sometimes by dodgy means. And that may not be enough to get the performance we really want. So something I haven't said is GPT-4 is really fun to play with, but that doesn't mean that it's commercially useful or that it can do all the things that you might imagine. You know, if you play with it, you find that it often makes mistakes. You don't really know when to trust it. So everybody wants to have better systems. And the hope is, well, we'll just keep making them better and better and bigger and bigger. They're driven by how much data they have, but we're running out of interesting new data. And even worse, we're making up bad data. So people are using things like ChatGPT, excuse me, to write fake books. And those fake books then are out there. And there's all kinds of garbage on the internet now. Like people have fake paintings that they use with systems like DALL-E. And so the quality of information is going down and it's kind of getting used up. And that's one reason we might see a plateau. Another reason we might see a plateau is even though these systems are fun to play with, they're missing a lot of things that we had in classical AI, like the ability to reason and follow facts. They can't check their own work. They can't do sanity checks or validation. The whole architecture might just never work as well as we hope. We've seen a somewhat similar thing with driverless cars, where people just try to add more and more data, hoping they would work. And so far they haven't. You know, we've had promises for over 12 years that, oh, we're going to get driverless cars next year. And basically what people have been doing is adding more and more data. But maybe the technology we have right now just isn't good enough. Maybe, you know, some days AI might be fantastic, but this year's AI really might be running into a wall, at least approaching a wall relatively soon.
Well, let me follow up on that, because I saw something on the internet the other day where somebody asks a ChatGPT to put 17 dots on a page. And there's clearly a line of 5 by 5. So there's 25 dots there. And the AI insists, I mean, in a way, it was a bit of an argument. The AI insists, no, I've checked it, and there's only 17 dots there. And it's pretty obvious there's only 25. How does that happen?
So what you have to remember is that what these systems do is they put together little bits of text. And there's a complicated way in which they do it. But I like to call them pastiche machines. They're putting together things that they've seen before. It's as if they could run them through a giant list of synonyms and even paraphrases. But at the end of the day, what they're doing is just predicting the statistics of how people use words. They don't actually have concepts like numbers. They really don't quite understand what numbers are. They don't really understand what a square is. They don't really understand any of the stuff that they're using. One term people have used is stochastic parrots, stochastic meaning random in some sense. Their comprehension is actually much more limited. That example was from my friend Phil Lieben. He sent it to me, and I think I put it on the web. And he had a lot of back and forth with the system, and the system just never really understood what it's talking about. There's a saying in the military, frequently wrong, never in doubt. And that's really, I think, what you have with these systems. They're also right a bunch of times, but they don't know which times they're correct and which times they're not. It's a problem for users because the user doesn't know until they get the output, is it right or wrong? And if you already knew, why are you using this system in the first place? So there's a bit of a problem right now with the quality control on these systems, and they don't have the conceptual depth that a human does.
You've compared some of the hype around AI to the so-called psychic's con. What is that?
So that was actually somebody else's idea, but I brought it to public attention yesterday. The idea is that the reason that a mind reader succeeds is partly because the only people who go to the mind reader show in the first place are not the skeptical people, right? Skeptical people are like, why would I watch that? So you start with a set of people that are not skeptical. You throw them a lot of garbage. Some of it sticks. And the people who aren't skeptical are like, wow, they said all these things that are true, forgetting about all the ones that they said were wrong. And that's kind of what happens with the large language models. You have some people that I think are more gullible, or that want to believe for whatever reason that this AI is great, and they notice the successes and they don't notice the failures. Well, a scientist says you need a numerator and a denominator here. You need to know what percentage it's correct. And you also need to know when it's wrong, how bad are those errors going to be? And so the reality is, like, everybody got super excited last year. But we are running out of improvements, at least for a little while. Things are slowing down. And if you look at most businesses, they all tried it out last year. Everybody subscribed to the hype, but most people are like, well, we're doing a pilot experiment right now. We're seeing if it works. Maybe we're running 3 pilot experiments. But you see very few people saying, yes, we use this every day and it's absolutely essential for what we do. The only people like that really are programmers. And there's some evidence that it's actually making the quality of their code worse. So you can write faster, but sometimes there are errors and they're hard to debug and so forth. So we're still, I think, a ways from having the practical AI that we're now dreaming of. Like, last year was amazing. It brought AI to the public. People realized, hey, this might really help me. But at the same time, I think it was premature. And that right now, the tools that we have are limited in what they can actually do. And we're kind of like fantasizing about some future world, but the tools we don't have, or the tools we have right now, are limited. It's kind of like in the age of alchemy. People realized, hey, you can do all this kind of cool stuff with the materials on Earth, but they didn't understand the periodic table. It was too early. I think we're kind of in the age of alchemy. You take these models, you stir them up, you hope that it works, you get a little more data. But we as a field don't really yet know what we're doing. And right now the alchemy is reaching its some limits, I think, or some limits. We'll move past them someday, but we might need some fundamental ideas like the periodic table to move forward.
Well, to that end, let me circle back to something you said about driverless cars a few moments ago. There are several big companies, Tesla, I guess, being the most prominent of them, that have made a huge bet that driverless cars are going to be with us and normal in not that distant a time. What's your view on that?
I think we're still going to be waiting a while. I've been saying since 2016 that driving is actually a pretty hard problem. Most of it, like 99.5% of the time, maybe even more, is easy. You just kind of stick in your lane and you signal and everything's great. But sometimes weird things happen. Like there'll be a police officer with a street sign. These systems can't even read the street signs. And so what I warned about in 2016 was edge cases, that you would find weird things that happen. You wouldn't have enough data. You wouldn't have covered it with some rule, and the system would do weird things. I described at the time a case that Stephen Levy had described in Wired about a driverless car and how it was dealing with leaves on the street. And like everybody, Google was so excited they could handle the leaves on the street. And I said the number of cases like this are going to be endless. It's going to be hard to get them all right. So that was 2016. And nobody listened to me. And I mean, as often they don't. And people poured more and more money into it. And $100 billion with a B has gone into driverless cars. There have been promises every year that they're coming next year, that we'll have fleets of them, that you'll be able to loan your car out at night and so forth. But the reality is all we have are demos. demos. It's always easier to build a demo than an actual product. We have demos that kind of work in San Francisco, that kind of work, well, they're about to maybe work in LA, they work in Phoenix. But, you know, if you live in the Northeast, they're not going to work for you. They don't know how to deal with snow. And they don't know how to deal, you know, if they're in Mumbai and they're rickshaws, they're not going to know how to deal with that. They're very narrowly tuned to the particular places they've been trained. Whereas a human driver, you can plop them down somewhere new and more or less they're able to drive. Humans reason about the world. They understand what objects are in the world. Last year, or maybe it was the year before, at Tesla, they have this feature called Summon. You press on your phone to have your car go across a parking lot. Someone did this at an airplane trade show, and the Tesla ran directly into a jet because it hadn't been trained on what jets are. So there's always this new and original case that these systems aren't understanding. Again, I'm not saying we'll never have driverless cars as kind of matter of routine, but every promise about, you know, it's going to be next year makes me cringe. I think we're still a long way from being able to do that reliably and effectively kind of wherever you want to go.
You sound like you're 180 degrees away from where Geoffrey Hinton was and from where he captured so much attention not that long ago when he said that AI could be so intelligent that he feared it might destroy us at some point down the road. Does that suggest that you are really not at all concerned about that, given that you think the whole thing is overblown?
I think there are immediate concerns and there are long-term concerns. The immediate concerns are these things, because they don't understand the world, can easily be exploited by bad actors to make misinformation. And that's already happening, and that's threatening democracy right now, even though these systems aren't very smart. They can also be used to clone voices. You don't have to have a system that really understands the world to clone voices, but a pretend kidnapper can clone your kid's voice and get a ransom out of you. So we already have problems. The issues that Hinton is mostly worried about are, what if machines take over the world? That's not going to happen anytime soon. I don't think anybody can say it will never happen. We don't really know where things will be 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now. I think it's worth worrying about those things. And in general, I think it's worth worrying about, can we keep the systems that we have safe? Right now, they're very unreliable, and that makes them unsafe. So I'm not 180 degrees away, I guess because there's different dimensions. I'm less worried about machines taking over the world, but I am very worried about the negative consequences of the ones that we have right now. In fact, every day I kind of ask myself, as someone who's worked in AI, I built 2 AI companies, I've worked in the field my whole life. Every day I say, are we doing a good job here? Is AI on balance going to be more positive for humanity, helping with medicine, helping with science, or is it more negative? Right now, there's a lot of negative things. Another one would be non-consensual deep fake porn. There's lots of problems right now. You know, AI is a dual-use technology. Another problem is the people making it are using a lot of copyrighted materials without compensating people. So you have to kind of add up the positives and the negatives. Right now, it might be a draw. It's not a clear win. It could even be a loss. I hope we'll build better, more reliable AI, and also that we will regulate the tech companies to make sure that they're not just kind of stealing everybody's data, and that we come up with an AI that's thriving for the whole world. But that's hard work, and that's actually what my next book is about. Is I don't think we can trust the companies to get us there. I don't think we can trust the governments to get us there because they're so influenced by the companies. And so I think the public needs to stand up and say, we want an AI that works for us. We realize that this is changing our world fast. We need our political candidates to understand this stuff, to have good policies around it. We, the citizens, need to get involved.
Well, speaking of governments, the government of Canada is certainly placing a big bet that AI is in the future and is going to be a significant part of our future. They just, I think it was $2.4 billion. They made an announcement not too long ago, an investment in many different AI factors. What does it say, given where you are on this issue, what does it say about those kinds of bets that governments all over the place are making on this future?
I think that the governments are all right to be placing bets on AI. I think they're placing too much of their bets on the current form of technology, which, as we've talked about, has its limits. And I would like to see more of that money go into research for alternative approaches, because in the end of the day, I think that this one's not going to get us to the promised land, so to speak. And I think that we need to have a broader intellectual community around AI. Right now, everybody's focused in one place. It's sort of like if invest, people say, don't put it all in stocks, don't put it all in bonds, don't put it all in real estate. You want to diversify, right? Right now, the field is not intellectually diversified. There's this one tool, we call it a large language model, built on something called a transformer. And that's almost all of the research. And what I think we need are different approaches, because I do think this one is likely to hit a wall soon. I think we're already seeing a period of diminishing returns where things are slowing down a bit. That's a sign we should be investing in other approaches. It's also a sign to a country like Canada that's not quite leading the game right now, although it has some fabulous people, to maybe try some other things. Maybe Canada could get back in the game if it did something innovative. When you have the entire world focusing on the same exact approach, that's actually time to maybe try something else. And if I had to worry about the Canadian investment, it's that I don't exactly see the means by which it's going to help Canada carve a new path, as opposed to kind of following the path that other people are setting right now.
Well, that's very disquieting, because, of course, we'd love to know that the $2.4 billion we're budgeting is not just going down a rabbit hole that won't pay off for us at the end of the day. I don't want to read too much into what you're saying, but it sounds like you're saying that money's not necessarily going for anything that's fabulously new or innovative.
I mean, it's going to allowing Canada to play the game that everybody else is playing. So right now, we need a lot of money to play the game that everybody else is playing. And I think it's fair that Canada put some money into that. But I would think about places like UBC. I happen to live in Vancouver, that I don't work at UBC, where people are taking different approaches. And, you know, I think they've been left out. I think almost all of the money in Canada has gone to an approach called deep learning. I think we need to look at some other approaches or ways of doing that in other ways and so forth. I hope that some of the money will go not just to building giant clusters of computers that happen to do this one technique well, but also to fostering some other techniques.
Okay, let's finish up on this, and that is the human mind is an amazing thing that took many billions of years to develop. And here's us, you know, putting billions and lots of effort into creating artificial intelligence, which may or may not be as phenomenal as many people think it is. I guess I'm wondering, at the end of the day, is this more an example of human hubris, thinking we could do in a relatively short space of time what it seems to have taken nature billions of years to figure out?
There's definitely some hubris in the field of AI right now. I think that the people who have the money right now, and they've produced a bunch of good results, but most of them know one thing really well, which is a particular kind of math. And I don't think they look carefully enough at the human mind itself. I think that psychologists, neuroscientists have a lot to contribute here and aren't really being listened to. I think that people who have this one approach that was getting better and better thought it was going to get infinitely better and stopped listening to anybody else. And I think that that's going to hurt them in the end.
I take it you don't think you're going to be paying Elon Musk that $10 million that you bet him anytime soon?
Well, I offered him $1 million. Someone else raised it to 10. The bet was, he said that we would have artificial general intelligence smarter than any human being by the end of next year, by the end of 2025. And I said, that's absurd. I offered $1 million. Somebody else raised it to 10. We have not heard from Elon Musk. Wall Street Journal asked for comment, got none. So I don't think he's going to take the bet. I think it's more fun for him to make these amazing predictions and then not have any accountability when they turn out to be wrong. Of course, you know, that's been his playbook for a long time. He's been promising driverless cars every year since 2014 that they would come next year, and they haven't happened yet.
Gary Marcus, we thank you for joining us on the line from Vancouver, BC. It's been a pleasure having you on our program again.
Great to be back. Thanks a lot for talking about this stuff.
So recently I had a conversation with my daughter about how big is the universe. So is it, when we think about the universe, does it include all the solar system, all the sky, the suns and the stars? She wanted to know how far away were the next people in the next universe, and were there people in the next universe? So for us, we're trying to figure out, is the universe actually only this big, or is it as big as we can possibly imagine?
Hi, I'm Jessie Muir. I'm a researcher, a postdoctoral researcher at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics in Waterloo. And I think a lot about the universe on very large scales for work. So thanks, Caroline, to both you and your daughter for your question. In your question, you mentioned the solar system. So it's the sun, our Earth, various planets and asteroids and comets that go around the sun. And the sort of size that we're dealing with there, the sun is 150 million kilometers from the Earth. And when we're thinking about outer space, thinking about these really large scales, it ends up being more useful than thinking about kilometers to talk about distances in terms of how long it takes light to travel. So to set a scale, it takes about 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to the Earth. Now, if we zoom out, we know that the sun is one of many stars we can see in the sky. And the nearest of those stars to us is 4 light years away. So light takes 4 years to travel from that star to us. And we can zoom out even further. So the sun and the stars we see in the sky are all part of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is very, very large, even compared to the spaces between stars. So the Milky Way, you can picture these like pretty pictures of spiral galaxies, kind of disc-shaped. And the size of the Milky Way is something like 80,000 light years across. So that means when we see light coming from the center of our galaxy, when we observe stars with telescopes, we're seeing light that has been traveling since around the time that pottery was invented during the Stone Age. And then we can zoom out even further and realize that our Milky Way, our galaxy, is one of billions of galaxies in the universe. And when we look out in space, the distances to those galaxies, we're looking at light that's been traveling from a couple million years to billions of years. So, huge number of galaxies in our huge, enormous universe.
And finally tonight, a further clarification to a story we covered on May the 6th. The Thunder Bay Police Service has been under consistent scrutiny for years, including recent calls for its disbandment. In our effort to shed further light on the story, we invited key figures in the debate onto our program, including Alvin Fiddler, Grand Chief of Anishinaabe Nation, and Melanie Beardy and Vincent Ostberg, the parents of Jenna Ostberg, a young Indigenous woman who died under tragic circumstances. We should have been more diligent in our efforts to reach the police service and police service board with a clear invitation to attend. That did not happen, and for that we unreservedly apologize. And once again, extend an invitation to those 2 institutions to come onto the agenda. Tomorrow on the program, a debate on whether Ontario should decriminalize drugs, and we hope you'll tune in for that. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.